How's it going, YouTube? We are back, and this time we're going to be doing a recap of NFL Week 2. I'm going to start doing these weekly before we get started. I have to ask you guys to leave a like and subscribe. It really does help me out. Let's start with the Thursday night game, the Giants and the Washington football team. The Washington football team comes out on top 30-29. I don't really know what to think about Washington this year. I mean, that defense, to me, it just doesn't look as good. They had a game against the Giants, who have one of the weaker O-lines in the league, and there were times that Danny Dimes, I always call him Danny Dimes, he was able to just stand in the pocket and have all the time in the world. He probably looked the most confident throwing the football behind this line that I've seen him in his entire career. Saquon is slowly starting to get back, and he looked pretty decent at times. The explosiveness was better this week than it was last week. Coming off as serious of an injury as he is, it's not surprising that he started off a little slow. If you're a fantasy football player and you drafted Saquon, I think you need to be patient with him because he could possibly win you a league. But I think this Washington football team might not be as good as they were last year. Definitely wasn't Heineke's fault. He played well, threw a pretty big time pick. And, in a rough situation to throw one, it didn't end up biting them. The Giants had this game in their pockets. They had this game won, but, they take an offsides penalty, and then Dustin Hopkins nails the field goal to win the game there. So, I don't know what to feel about this Washington football team, because they were a team that went to the playoffs and gave the Bucs a really hard time. But right now, they don't look too hot. Cincinnati, Chicago. This game was a real interesting one. Probably one of Joe Burrow's worst games of his career. He's not a guy that typically throws a lot of interceptions. He's someone who makes smart passes and stuff of that nature. He's normally a really good at reading a defense and making smart throws. But he just didn't look, himself in this game. Credit to Chicago's defense. Their offense was a little bit stifled by Cincinnati's defense as well. So that was just a really good defensive game for both sides. Dalton got hurt for a bit. We saw a little bit of Justin Fields. I don't really know what to say about that. Jamar Chase got back into the end zone, so the whole thing about him not being able to catch an NFL football is, I think it's past him, even though he had trouble breaking through that defense a little bit. But, close game for both sides. I thought it was a pretty even matchup on paper. And next week, we'll see how they do against their next opponent. I put Houston twice. Houston and Cleveland. This should say Cleveland. Houston and Cleveland. Cleveland wins this game by 10 points, 31-21. But this Houston team is interesting. I mean, for a while there, it was a pretty close game. And I don't know if it's a discredit to Cleveland or if it's a credit to Houston. I think Tyrell Taylor is doing a good job in his role. Cleveland didn't really have an answer for him at some points in the game. So that's another team is Houston, where they aren't supposed to be good, but they're performing pretty decently well. I know they played Jacksonville in week 1 and they blew them out. But you're talking about a team that a lot of people wrote off as to be the worst team in the league, missing their quarterback, with a subpar defense, subpar receiving core. Brandon Cooks has been a beast. But they're competing. They're fighting. Obviously, they haven't won a game yet. They're 1-1 now after blowing out Jacksonville. But I don't know whether to discredit this to Cleveland or just give credit where credit is due with Houston. I just don't know yet. We'll have to see how Houston does against its other tough opponents, and how Cleveland does against their tougher opponents. The Rams in India, really good game there. For a bit, it looked like the Colts were gonna have a chance at this one. Right where you would want them in a spot where they have time to go and make a last minute drive. But unfortunately, Carson Wentz rolled his ankle pretty bad. Jacob Eason has to go in and throws a pick right away. So, not a smart throw, not even a good throw. I don't know who he was throwing to, but the Rams defense, they got touched up a little bit. Do with that as you may. But Jonathan Taylor wasn't astounding. He had 64 yards, not bad, against a tough team to run against in the Rams. Darrell Henderson looks to be that number 1 back. I know he got injured, and it looks like Sony Michel is going to be their number 2 guy. Cooper Kupp's an absolute monster. We finally figured out who their number 1 target is for Stafford. It's Cooper Kupp. I've always been a big fan of Cooper Kupp. I think he's been a pretty good player ever since he came up. Even though he had that serious injury to start his career, pretty much, he's been really, really consistent, really solid for Goff before, and now Stafford. The Rams look like they're going to be a good team. They got a tough matchup with the Bucks, in which they are the favorites to win that game. Apparently, if I was gonna bet that game, you'd take the Super Bowl champs as the underdogs every single time. Buffalo, Miami, and this one was a laugher right away. Buffalo rolled right over them. Also didn't help that Tua got hurt in the first quarter, so their number 1 quarterback was gone. Jacoby Brissett didn't do a super good job. Buffalo's defense looked really, really nice, really tough, really hard to move on. Josh Allen was Josh Allen, you know what I mean? They're who they are for a reason. Zach Moss came out and we made a Zach Moss sighting after he was a healthy scratch in week 1. Scores 2 touchdowns. Devin Singletary was a good running back for them as well in this game. So it's gonna be interesting with that nice 1-2 punch that they have. They have a little bit of an underrated running back core there with those two. So not a very good matchup for Miami. They play the Raiders. I think the Raiders are gonna beat them. The Raiders coming off a pretty two solid matchups. So I expect Miami to end up 1-2 this week, hopefully. New England and the Jets, 25-6. New England just dominated them on the defensive side of the ball. Offensively, I would have liked to see it a little more of a wider margin. The Jets are not a good team, but their defense at times were able to lock up Mac Jones and the Patriots offense. But they do enough to win. It's exactly what they should do against a team that the Jets are. Probably the worst game we'll ever see out of Zach Wilson, throwing 4 interceptions. He had a rough time. But he's young. He doesn't have a lot of options on that team. Not a lot of protection. So it looks like that I was correct in that situation where in thinking that Sam Darnold was not the problem in New York. It was not Sam Darnold's fault. It was the lack of receiving options, the lack of offensive line, the lack of a running game. There was a lot of problems in New York for Sam Darnold. He didn't get a fair chance over there, unfortunately. And now a young guy in Zach Wilson gets stuck in a situation that Sam Darnold was in for like the last however long since he got drafted. But it is what it is. Zach Wilson's going to have to figure it out the same way the rest of the Jets team is going to have to figure it out as well. San Francisco and Philly. This is a game that I expected to be a little more high scoring, being that Jalen Hurts is one of the more dynamic quarterbacks in the league right now in terms of throwing and running. Frisco, Deebo Samuel is back. They have so many nice little offensive pieces. I just really think that they should start Trey Lance already, get Garoppolo out of the games. I just don't think that he's too offensively inclined or as offensively gifted as Trey Lance is. But they're easing his way into it, so I understand what the thinking is there. I just wonder how long it's going to be before we start seeing Trey Lance in a starting role. The running back situation is also pretty interesting for the 49ers. Elijah Mitchell, Jermichael Hasty, Trey Sermon. They have a bunch of guys that are capable running backs after Raheem Mostert's injury. So I just wonder, who's going to head that. Right now it's Mitchell, but I believe all 3 running backs are hurt with something. Sermon has a head injury. I know Hasty has a shoulder injury or something, or an ankle injury, and Elijah Mitchell has like a shoulder or ankle injury as well. So it's going to be interesting what they do with that. But defensively, both teams dominated. It was just a rough game all the way around to move the football. So we'll see how each team's offenses bounce back in week 3. Vegas versus Pittsburgh. I think now, I know last week I was like, if we beat Pittsburgh, I think it's time to consider the Raiders a legit team. They beat Pittsburgh 26-17. Derek Carr probably should be the MVP frontrunner right now. Obviously, it's week 2. A lot of things can change between week 2 and week 17. But right now, he's leading the league in passing yards by almost 200 yards. And he just looks so comfortable. He trusts this offensive line that is, on paper, way weaker than it was last year. They're finding ways to win. No Jacobs against Pittsburgh. Waller didn't have as good of a game as he normally does. But Edwards, he came through when they needed him to. Ruggs got open when they needed him to. He had a big game. And then Hunter Renfrow. he's the Raiders version of like Cole Beasley, someone similar like that. Third down and short, third and Renfro. That's what they're calling it in Vegas. I think Vegas is a team that we need to take into consideration now. Being a Raider fan, it sounds probably a little bit biased, but they've beaten two of the top teams in the AFC, and they look like they handled Pittsburgh pretty decently. I will say that. The only problem is that I have with Vegas is that secondary. I know 17 points is not too much, but Deontay Johnson had a field day. Caught the ball, I believe, 8 times for 105 yards. I would like to see them cut that down, but what they are doing is cutting down on the chunk plays from running backs, one of the worst run defenses last year. Najee Harris has had a hard time in the league so far. He only had 30-something yards, I believe, as well. But he did break off a nice 25-yard touchdown play. I don't know if it was a catch or a run, but he did have a pretty nice touchdown. He also stiff-armed Jonathan Abrams into the gulag. But, Raiders get the win. It's a big win. They're 2-0. They play Miami. So we'll see what happens. We'll go week to week with Vegas for now. New Orleans against Carolina. So New Orleans played one of the most shocking games against Green Bay in week 1, blowing them out, giving them no chance, and then they get blown out by Carolina. So that's interesting as well. Was New Orleans just on their best game, their A game, and they played their worst level game against Carolina? Or is Carolina really good? Or was Green Bay just really bad? There's a lot of things that we need to consider, but Carolina's defense is for real. That defense is serious. That defense is tough. Jameis Winston did not play good at all. He looked really inconsistent. Sam Darnold played great. DJ Moore looks to be one of the better receivers, probably top 15 right now. I still think DJ Moore is underrated, so McCaffrey's a beast. We know that. They have a lot of weapons down in Carolina, so how far that team goes, really, who knows? For me, it's going to be how far can that defense take them, and how comfortable is Sam Darnold going to be behind that offensive line. They've done a pretty decent job of protecting him, and he's done a pretty decent job of protecting the football. So we'll see. That's another team that we're going to have to take into a week-to-week basis. Denver and Jacksonville. This is a game which seemed pretty one-sided. I mean, on paper, it should have been. I feel like Denver probably should have scored more against this team. Trevor Lawrence has not looked good so far, but he doesn't have a lot of weapons either. So I'm not going to knock off Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson yet. They really don't have anything. Marvin Jones is, Trevor Lawrence's number 1 receiver. DJ Chark, Laviska Shenault. They have like C-tier receivers and an F-tier line. So James Robinson hasn't been good either. It's just a rough time for Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars. Denver, Cortland Sutton really established himself this game. I always seen him as the number 1 over there. I know Jerry Jeudy is a beast, but I've always seen Cortland Sutton before last season's injury, but he was the number 1 guy. I always considered him that. I really like Cortland Sutton a lot. I think he's a beast. He had a lot of yards. Noah Fant finally found the end zone. Obviously, finally being week 2, but those are the things that you need to see from an offense. You need to see top-tier players playing at a top-tier level. I consider Noah Fant to be a top-tier tight end, so these are the things that we need to see early on. Teddy Bridgewater's look good in Denver, but I don't know how good Denver is. They're 2-0 with a really, really soft schedule. Obviously, I would put Vegas over Denver because of the level of competition they beat. They are both 2-0, tied for first place, but Vegas has beaten Pittsburgh and Baltimore, and Denver has beaten Jacksonville and New York. So, Raiders are in first place in my opinion. Minnesota and Arizona, and man, does this scream special teams matters. Minnesota had the game on the line. Right there in field goal range. Not shanked it, but missed wide. Arizona wins the game. They're 2-0 now. And this is a game where Arizona's defense did not look nearly as good as they did against Tennessee. The Dalvin Cook, they have great players out in Minnesota. High-scoring game, fun to watch, but this is a game where we have to think about as well. How good is Arizona? How good is Minnesota? They're both scoring a lot of points. Is that the defense has had a down day? How far can they go? Because I feel like Arizona is a team to consider. That NFC West is a horrible, horrible division to be in. There's just good teams up and down. You got 49ers, you got the Seahawks, you got Arizona, and then you got the Rams. So, they can be as good as first, or they can be as good as last over there in that division. That's just the way it's built. Tough all the way through. Atlanta, 25-48 to Tampa. Somebody needs to be able to shut down Tampa's offense. And who is it going to be? Is it going to be the Rams next week? Because if anybody has a chance to shut down that offense, it's the Rams. And if they can't do it, then I don't really think anybody can. Tom Brady is just getting younger as time goes by. He's completely defying the laws of time, and it really is unfair to watch, to be honest. Other teams, have young quarterbacks or quarterbacks that are in their prime that aren't even scraping the level that Tom Brady is right now. And he's about to throw more touchdowns in his 40s than he threw in his 20s. So he really is just getting better with age. He's not aging. He's just getting wiser, apparently. And it's really annoying. Antonio Brown didn't have as good of a game. Mike Evans had a better game. Godwin is his go-to. And Gronkowski is just a beast. Their defense is shut down. They had a little bit of trouble, but, Atlanta is supposed to have a pretty good offense. Kyle Pitts looked better. Calvin Ridley found the end zone. They have a pretty decent offense on paper. It's just their defense is just so bad. But I will say, second-year player AJ Tyrell looked much, much better. There was plays where he looked beat, and he made a great recovery, staying calm, jumped up to make spectacular pass deflections. So, love to see that from him. I was really big on him coming out of the draft. He struggled a little bit in his rookie year with injuries as well, but he looked way, way better in this game against Tampa. He looks like he could be a nice cornerstone of that secondary for them. Dallas and the Chargers, another interesting game. I expected it to be much more higher scoring, considering that Dallas' defense is really not good, and the Chargers' defense is supposed to be better. But, Dallas wins this game with a field goal from Greg Zuerlein, and he was the reason why they couldn't beat Tampa in Week 1. He's the reason why they beat the Chargers in Week 2. It's just the way sports is. Sometimes you're the hero and sometimes you're the villain. You know what I mean? It's just the way it is. Zeke looked a little bit better, found his way to the end zone, but this really was the Tony Pollard Express game right here. Breakout game for him. If you're a fantasy owner of Zeke, it's you might see his touches decrease because of how good Tony Pollard has been. We really need to consider that system maybe a 1A, 1B now because Tony Pollard is really developing into a nice young player. For the Chargers, Herbert looked okay, didn't look amazing, had a couple of turnovers, I believe. I know he threw one, but he's not gonna struggle. That wasn't really a struggle game. It's just more, I think that they need to find ways to get Eckler more involved because I think that he really is a big portion of their offense, and he wasn't as involved in Week 1. Week 2, they get him involved a little bit more, but I still think there's more that they need to get out of him because that running game needs to be boosted if they want to be able to run play action and let Herbert throw bombs over defenses. Tennessee and Seattle. Tennessee bounces back. Derrick Henry bounced back big time. He got shut down against Arizona in Week 1. Week 2, he has, a 4-touchdown night. But I will say his first half was concerning. I know that's kind of how he goes. Hard power runs early in games, tires the defense out, short yards, and then in the second half he's breaking off 60-yard runs here and there and scoring touchdowns. That's just the way he is, I guess. But for me, it is concerning. Week 1 he gets shut down. Week 2, the first half he gets shut down, and then he breaks out. I would like to see him be consistent with that running game because I just don't know if their offense can be good enough to win them games if their defense is playing as badly as they are because they are not good. Julio Jones got robbed of a touchdown in my opinion. Derrick Henry pretty much won them that game on the offensive side. Tannehill looked better, much better, 340-something yards, but no touchdowns. So I would look to see Tannehill get on the board soon at least. I don't know if Henry's just going to keep hogging all the touchdowns for himself. If he does, so be it. But Tennessee looked much better. Their offense looked much more awake. And maybe just the Week 1 jitters and stuff like that. It happens. KC and Baltimore, another really, really good game. So far, the first 2 weeks of the NFL have had some really, really pristine games, especially the night ones. But KC versus Baltimore, Baltimore gets the upset victory over KC. I think that's Patrick Mahomes' first loss in September, which is an amazing feat for someone that is so young. He has a pretty solid record for September. But Lamar Jackson finally, I think he's going to quiet a lot of haters with this game about not being able to play from behind, throwing on, being able to throw the ball on pass-only situations. He's in a situation where he has pretty much no running backs, but he's also probably one of the better running backs in the league. I know a lot of people don't like that joke, but it's the truth. He has 1,000-yard rushing seasons. He's as good as a running back as any running back in the league. But big victory for Baltimore. Bounce back after losing to the Raiders. So are the Raiders for real? Can they beat the Chiefs? I know they beat them last year, but we have to really see how that goes when Vegas and KC meet up in the future. Detroit and Green Bay. Nice bounce back game for Green Bay. But I'd still be a little bit concerned. I'm still a little concerned about Green Bay. That first half, Detroit pretty much had their way with their defense. Goff looked really, really good, and then halftime came around and they just turned it up. Aaron Jones had a great game. 3 touchdowns, 2 receiving. Or sorry, was it a 4-touchdown game with 3 receiving and 1 rushing. Great bounce back for him as well, only having 9 yards in week 1. Has a much better game, 100 yards from scrimmage with a handful of touchdowns. Rodgers looked a little bit better in that second half, but there's been times where he just hasn't looked himself. He made a nice throw to Devontae Adams, a perfectly thrown ball, great route run, and a great catch to go with it. But I'm a little bit concerned for Green Bay. This is a team that I had going to the bowl pretty much, going to the Super Bowl. I just don't know at this point, with the way Detroit played early on and with the way the Saints beat them, I just don't know how concerned Green Bay should be. Green Bay fans, you have to let me know what the panic level is over there. I think it's still so early. It doesn't even really matter how bad they lost to the Saints. If they can string together some good performances, like the one they had in the second half of this game, then obviously they should be considered to go to the Super Bowl. They're one of the only teams, in my opinion, that can possibly contend with Tampa, but we'll have to see how that goes from there. And that's going to do it for this video. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe, comment your guys' favorite team, how they're doing. If your team is one of the only ones that is 2-0, leave a like, drop a comment for that as well. If you guys would like to make a donation to the channel, it's No Hate Media on Cash App, and I'll see you guys next time.